Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome in, welcome in. So, today I've been thinking a lot about the recent government shutdown and, just one of the most particular elements of it being the suspension of SNAP benefits. And, so today I just want to kind of talk about that and just kind of see, you know, just a little bit more about it, really. I mean, I don't know. This is a conversation, right? So let's just get into it. Let's get into it. My first real question, comes down to what is SNAP, right? Like, what is SNAP? When was it created? Why do we have it? How does it work? And just really, is it important to provide basic needs to humans in general? That's really what it comes down to, right? I mean, it's a supplemental nutrition assistance program, and we're providing food, right? But let's just see what ChatGPT says. Okay, so SNAP is a U.S. federal government program that provides food purchase assistance to low-income individuals and family. Purchase assistance, right? It's not trying to just give them food for free. It's trying to assist them. Let's read some more about it, right? When was it created, right? So the first prototype program began in 1939 during the Great Depression. Between 61 and 64, the federal government ran pilot food stamp programs. In 64, the Food Stamp Act of 64 was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson, creating a permanent food stamp program. The program has evolved and been renamed in October 2008. The program formally became SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Why do we have SNAP, right? Okay, well, that's a good question. Reducing hunger and food insecurity, supporting nutrition and health, economic agrarian policy. Some of the early legislative language of the 64 Act cited strengthening the agricultural economy as a goal by increasing demand for farm products, as well as improving nutrition for low income households. So I'm guessing based on what they're saying here, that early goal was to get farm fresh produce onto your table to make America healthier, to get them healthier. Social safety net function. SNAP serves as part of the broader social welfare net in the U.S., cushioning households during economic hardship, unemployment, and other periods of income stress. So, if you go back all those years ago to 1939, we were going through a Great Depression, or we were in the early stages of a Great Depression. And so we were trying to help individuals, on bread lines and things like that, kind of pull themselves up and just be able to feed themselves. So we didn't have people dying in the streets, like they would say, like in some third world country, right? I mean, so, that's another thing too that I want to kind of talk about too as we get into the whole mix. But let's just keep talking about SNAP. Let's just keep going through SNAP. So how does it work, right? So it's a federal program that's administrated, administered by the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, through its Food and Nutrition Services, FNS, with states operating local offices and handling eligibility and benefits issuance. Okay, and then again, as always, there's always, links so you can kind of take a look. Where is this information being pulled? Do you really believe it? Check the links. Ask ChatGPT for the links. Don't be afraid to really dive into it to make sure that you're getting good information, and as always, you're getting unbiased information, right? Okay. Now, households must meet income and asset tests based on eligibility, right? So it's a needs driven system. That's what it is. Okay. Benefit calculation. Benefits are calculated based on the household size, income, allowed deductions, things of that nature. Benefit delivery and usage. Benefits are issued electronically via an EBT card. Okay. What can be purchased? Generally, food for home preparation, consumption, bread, cereals, fruits, vegetables, meats, fish, poultry, dairy, seeds, and plants. Seeds and plants for growing food are eligible. I've never seen that, but sure. Items such as hot prepared meals, Alcohol, tobacco, non-food items, cleaning supplies, toiletries are not eligible. What's the goal? It's self-sufficiency. The program is intended to supplement, not replace income, and thus help households move toward self-sufficiency. Is it important for providing basic needs to humans? Now, this is where ChatGPT is going to take a question that I asked, and it's going to try to put more nuance into it and give us a detailed response that kind of speaks to how other people feel, right? And you can see where it's pulling those opinion pieces. What is SNAP and why does it matter, from Johns Hopkins Public Health website? You know what I mean? Um, it's going to pull that information, but it says it's ChatGPT is telling us yes, and here's a breakdown of why it's important, and here's why. Why is it important? Well, food's a basic human need. It's basic. People need to eat. SNAP reaches large numbers, reduces food insecurity, economic multiplier, because the benefits are spent on food quickly. They also serve to support retail stores, agriculture, the farmers, right? Local economies and lower income communities. It's kind of like a big subsidy that kind of gets blanketed across the board. It's stimulus to the economy, but in a different way, without just giving you money that you could go and, say, spend on a computer or go and spend on shoes or clothing, things of that nature. You can only spend it directly on food, but it trickles out into the economy in other ways and props up, like it said, it props up local economies and lower income communities. Dignity and autonomy. Unlike some forms of in-kind aid, soup kitchens, food pantries, etc., SNAP allows recipients to shop in regular stores, choose their own food items, eligible items, obviously, and maintain greater autonomy. One commentary called this a key strength of the program. So apparently it's saying that dignity and autonomy is also an important aspect of this, but that's kind of an outlier. That's really personal opinions, people looking at certain things and trying to add emotional statements and emotional frameworks to a conversation. I'm not really interested in that aspect of it. I'm interested in cold hard facts. I want to know the real numbers and exactly what it is. Now here's some caveats, okay? Benefit adequacy. While it's helpful, benefits may not always fully cover the cost of a nutritious diet, especially in high cost areas or when households face other financial pressures. So we're talking about housing, utilities, and medical care. So, what exactly do human needs? What exactly would be a definitive list of human needs, right? Because I mean, if we're creating a program as a society, if we're thinking about that in terms of what is this all for and what's the whole goal of this, then we're using legislation to address a need, okay? So let's make a list of needs and let's think about this list in general. And we're gonna specify. We're gonna get real specific about SNAP and how it's administered and are we really doing a good enough job? And ChatGPT is gonna help us to really understand all this. But let's look at that list, right? So here's your first thing that you need: air and oxygen. I think that's pretty important. Water, okay. Water is a basic need, right there on the list. Food and nutrition, sleep, shelter, protection from the elements, basic sanitation and waste removal, medical care, treatment of injuries, infections, childbirth, chronic conditions. Now, the world that we live in, humans are very, unfortunately, they're very focused on the idea that it's not their responsibility to take care of other human beings. And that's a sad thing to say, but that really is the idea that is shared on a global scale. We just don't look at it that way. Why should I have to use money to take care of you and take care of your family? Why aren't you doing the thing that I'm doing right now, which is working? Why aren't you out there making money and taking care of your own kids? Why are you having kids if you can't take care of them? There's a lot of that that gets thrown around. And when we come together as a people and we start to create empires and cities and local governments that turn into state governments that turn into federal governments, when we start to create this thing that we call society, then we have to wonder, at least, what's the ultimate goal? Like, what are we all pushing for? If the ultimate goal is just individual achievement and thinking about your individual self, if that's the ultimate goal, then we should just go back to the old days with warrior kings. Might makes right. But if we're not going to do that, then what are we going to do in service of this ultimate goal? But before we can even do that, what is that ultimate goal? Okay? So here's my question to ChatGPT. If we are in the process of making the society of the USA, what is the ultimate goal? Is it vast wealth? Is it individual excellence? What did I get here? Individual excellence. There we go. Excellence. Two L's? Yeah, probably. Excellence. Yeah? You like that? Okay, good. Is it individual excellence? Is it utopia? What is the ultimate goal for any society? I mean, what is it? Like, why are we doing all of this? Why are we working together? What does ChatGPT say? So, a society exists to provide conditions that allow its people to survive, flourish, and perpetuate themselves better than they could alone. Everything else, wealth, government, laws, culture, technology, those are just tools towards that end. So, the fundamental goal of society is to create stable conditions where humans can meet all basic needs and pursue full human potential. It's not utopia. It's not forced equality, not maximum wealth, not unchecked individualism, not rigid collectivism, you know, us versus them, social class, things of that nature. Not domination over others, not even happiness, because happiness is a byproduct of needs being met. The core purpose is human flourishing. So, SNAP and food benefits like it are in service to the proposal of meeting all basic needs. And we have a list of these basic needs. And we're not talking about physical and social safety needs. We're not talking about social, emotional, and psychological needs. We're not talking about cognitive and developmental needs. No, no. We're talking about you just surviving your physical survival needs. These are just very, very basic elements. But what's the real cost of all of that? Because when the government was shut down, and I'm going to ask Chat GPT this, when the government was shut down here in the US, they said it would cost $9 billion to fund SNAP benefits for a single month. How much money per person on SNAP is that? I'm curious. What does that work out to? $9 billion. Okay. So using recent data, and this is what it's trying to do. It's trying to pull this out, from the air, and it's trying to figure this out. Okay. So using recent data, in fiscal year 2024, the SNAP program served on average about 47 million people per month. Okay. Now, the figure you cited of $9 billion for a single month is close to other published estimates of around 8 to 9 billion per month. Okay. So if we take $9 billion and we divide that by $41 and 41 million, 41.7 million people that are supposed to be on the program right now. Okay. Then that's $216 per person for the month on average. Okay. So $216 across the board. Man, woman, child, if you're on SNAP, that's what you get. So, based on that number, how much should a family of 7 get? Okay. So, based on that number, with a family of 7, they should receive roughly 1,500 per month based on the national average estimate. But there's important notes here, okay? Because based on your income deductions, your state, your household expenses, the USDA maximum allotment tables, if you're just looking at the number as a whole, then it's like, okay, then here's $216 per person. But that's not how it really works out. Because while 216 may be a number that everyone could get, that is not the number that everyone is getting. And I can tell you that from personal experience. My family, um, you know, we are on SNAP, and our family of 7 is getting about half of that number. Now, my wife is working, and I just recently stopped working. So obviously, those numbers get adjusted, but they don't get adjusted up. That I can tell you. A lot of the times it really just goes down. They just get adjusted down. And you would, I think, okay, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But what's the reality of the situation? If you're working, how do you still qualify for these benefits? That's a good question, right? If a person is working, how do they still qualify for this assistance? Can't they just buy their own food? I mean, it's a good question, right? It's a pretty solid question. It's a fair question. Okay. SNAP is designed for the working poor, not the unemployed. So as a program, it wasn't designed to just feed people who have zero income. It was designed for people, okay, that are working, but that are also poor, even though they're working. Because as much as you may think in your head, this is not something that I want my tax dollars to go towards, I want you to reconsider your society, the place that you live, because when you go to the park with your family, you want that park to be clean. You want that trash to not build up everywhere along the roadways that you drive. You want to make sure that there are people to fill your coffee orders and your lunch orders, and people to clean the areas in your businesses. This is the working poor. This is what they do. And your tax dollars supplementing their wages means that you get to keep paying them little to nothing, and they'll stay alive because of those extra dollars that they get for SNAP benefits. Does that make sense? Now, at the same time, if you're really fiscally responsible and you're really like, okay, well, I definitely want to make sure that America is not in, trillions of dollars of debt, and I want to make sure that there's no, freeloaders, things of that nature. Well, now you got to start looking at other businesses that are potentially competing within your space because they're being subsidized by this money as well. and they get to lower their wages and keep everything at a national, what is the national minimum wage still? 7.25, right? They get to keep those wages lower and they get to make profits too. If you really wanted to push competition out and really drive the market, then forcing everyone to pay a livable wage, man, that'd be a crazy way to do it. But again, that wouldn't be real capitalism. So let's get into this, right? Wages often aren't enough to cover basic expenses. That's crazy. But a full-time worker who's earning $15 an hour makes $2,600 a month before taxes. Now compare that to typical costs. Rent, $1,200 to $2,400 a month. Utilities, $200 a month. That's so low. That's so low. My electric bill for the past couple of months has been $800 plus. Yeah. Transportation, $300 to $700. They're talking about car payments here. Also, that's about, that's a very wide range. Childcare. People might say, you might say, why are you having kids if you can't afford them? Well, I need you to kind of take a step back and think for a second that you wouldn't exist unless somebody decided, to have you. And then on top of that, this economy doesn't keep driving unless we have fresh bodies for the grinder. Yeah, you need dum dums out there like me having 5 kids, 6 kids, 7 kids, because all of those kids, for the most part, are going to become workers. And then you're going to be able to turn them into consumers. And those consumers will drive your businesses. Not only will those consumers drive your businesses, but while you're evading and kind of moving your way out of all of these taxes that you don't really want to pay by offsetting capital gains and unrealized gains and building LLCs overseas and putting money into foreign accounts, banks where they can become tax shelters and havens, and you're saving all of this generational wealth. Someone has to put some tax money in because there has to be something there to fuel the defense budget. There has to be something there to, repair roads, and we need to be able to hire city workers and all kinds of things. So you need these dum-dums out there having these kids that you definitely don't want to have. And in order to do any of that, they've got to be able to live. And with these types of prices, well, they can't live on a low wage, and you can't make money as an entrepreneur unless you can pay them a low wage. So it all becomes a necessary evil, doesn't it? This kind of cycle, if you will, that we're all kind of trapped in together because we want all of the benefits of society. We want to be able to breathe. And we don't want to have to worry about the next local warlord who might come along and decide that their might makes more right than the place or the person that was sheltering you at the time, right? We want to make sure that we can have this human excellence and we can go to schools and we can enjoy our yachts and we can do all those things. And if we don't have the working poor, then we don't have a middle class. And that's a thing that we don't really talk about, right? If there's a middle class, then there must be an upper class and there must be a lower class. And who are these upper class people and who are these lower class people? We don't like to use that terminology, right? But we use the middle class terminology all the time. That the middle class is what makes America great, that makes it the wealthiest country in the world. And when we're doing this, we forget that there is a foundation for every house that has ever been built. And in this country, that is the working poor. And we don't talk enough about them. But today's video is going to be about that because we're going to talk about SNAP and we're going to talk about food. So a working household only qualifies if their income falls below certain thresholds. For example, in most states, the gross income must be at least 130% below the federal poverty line. Okay, this means that many working families who earn too much to be poor but too little to survive still qualify. So then you're thinking to yourself, I've seen people, right? They've got these vehicles, they've got this stuff. Andrew just said that his last couple electricity bills are like $800. That doesn't seem like a poor person to me if he can afford that kind of bill. But I don't make enough money to survive, but I make more money than to be poor. And then people look at me and they go, "You're leeching off the system. Why aren't you working?" Oh man, let me tell you, we'll do another video about why aren't you working? Because man, that's I don't even know what to say about that. There's so much to go over there. Filling out 40, 50, 60 applications, getting 3, 4 different interviews where they just tell me, yeah, you just seem so overqualified for this position. To which I always reply, I am ready to work for you. It doesn't matter if I'm overqualified for the position. That just means you're going to get a quality candidate for pennies on the dollar. And still no takers. And still no takers. It's crazy. But we'll get in that in another video. So, SNAP assumes people are working. All right. Now this isn't widely understood, but it expects and requires employment. And that's true. That's true. I had to get fingerprinted. I had to get fingerprinted. It's crazy. Um, but you should be attending education programs and job training and working at least 80 hours a month, and you can lose your benefits. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But again, this is a basic need that we're trying to fulfill because again, we have this whole thing, society, right? So it says here that many industries depend on low wage labor. Retail, childcare, elder care, janitorial, food service, agriculture, delivery services, warehouses, they often pay low wages in order for those businesses to exist. Now, we do a lot as a country, as a society. We throw a lot of money around. And to really give you an idea of where this falls into, let's kind of take a look at how much money we spend in a year. So tell me, how much money do we spend in a year here in the US? Okay. Now, this is talking about SNAP in specific, right? Okay. No, I want to know how much the US government spends in a year and where SNAP falls in that. That's what I want to know. Total, everything. $6.1 trillion is the answer. You see that number? It's a crazy number, right? And where does it go? 1.3 trillion goes to Social Security, a trillion goes to Medicare. Medicaid, ACA, CHIP, 616 billion. Our defense, 820 billion. Interest on the national debt. This is just interest, 659 billion. And then all other federal programs. Everything else falls under this list. Veterans benefits. Those people that we sent to fight and die for us. Transportation, education, homeland security, federal, employees, NASA, the justice system, foreign aid. All these people with their America First policy, and here we are still sending money, even when they're in power. We're still sending money to other countries. And people would say, well, of course we have to, right? I mean, it's a global economy, it's a global world. If we don't have allies all over the world, then how can Americans travel safely? When we take care of other countries, then other countries take care of our citizens as they trot around the globe. Does that make sense? That what you do for someone else, that goodwill and all of that good effort comes back to everyone who falls under the shield of Lady Liberty as you travel the globe. But America first. Agriculture, SNAP, and other food programs, hundreds of smaller agencies. We're spending $6.1 trillion a year. But if the ultimate goal of society is to meet those basic needs, is this money being well spent? I mean, that's a good question. I want to ask ChatGPT, if the ultimate goal of a society is to address the basic needs of all humans so they can live, as we talked about earlier, is this money being well spent? Is it? Maybe all that money we're spending on the military is accomplishing all those other goals. Look, chat's buttering me up. This is a real meaningful question. Not political, not philosophical, but just practical. Okay. Is U.S. government spending aligned with the actual fundamental purpose of society to meet basic human needs so that people can live and flourish? Here is the clearest possible answer. And it's trying to be diplomatic. Look at that. Partially yes, partially no. Okay, now remember what I told you about chat. It's unbiased. It's got no skin in the game. It's going to bring in the data and it's going to talk to you based on the data that it brings in. And remember, you can check all this data. You can ask for resources, links. It'll provide those links for you. You can do your own research, okay? But let's break it down by actual human needs and compare them to what the US spends the money on, okay? So, are the basic survival needs funded? So we've got food, right? You got SNAP, 1.6%. You got WIC, 0.1%. You got school meals, 0.2%. They're low cost, high impact programs, directly address human survival. Research shows they work. So, in that consideration, this part of spending is effective. Shelter and housing. Federal spending on housing assistance is tiny. Choice vouchers, public housing, homeless programs, they make up about 0.5% of federal spending. Yet housing is still one of the most crushing needs in the US. So the answer here, no. Significantly underinvest in shelter, the second most important human need after food. Healthcare. The US spends $2 trillion on healthcare through government programs. Outcomes are worse than any other wealthy nation. Cost per person are highest in the world. Many still lack access, myself included. System is designed around profit instead of care. The money is enormous, but efficiency is poor. It meets needs, but in an extremely expensive way. Huh. Food for thought, food for thought. Water, sanitation, and infrastructure. Infrastructure spending is decent but reactive. Water systems are aging, Flint level crisis still happening. Rural sanitation failures are widespread. Moderate amount is spent, but maintenance is underfunded. We don't maintain it. Education, starting to get into the more philosophical things, right? Social safety, income stability. Okay. Well spent but limited. Excellent spending that directly provides human survival and dignity. Social security plus disability. 22%. In order to get to social security age, you've got to be able to survive and you have to have worked at least 10 years. Okay. At least 40 quarters. I think that's what they say. I'm specifying more in the Medicare vein, but you know what I mean. Like you got to get old or you got to get hurt in some way that you just can't work, and then they'll send you a check. At that point, they'll send you a check. 22% is what they're saying. I don't know how accurate that number is. Maybe that's accurate. I don't know. Defense, does defense contribute to basic human needs? This is what we were talking about earlier, right? All the money that we spend on the military. It contributes to safety from foreign invasion, but much is spent on global projection, contractors, and weapon systems that are not tied to survival. Some is essential, but a significant portion does not directly serve basic human needs. Interest on the national debt. It's just a drain on meeting human needs, right? Is the money well spent when measured against the goal of meeting human needs? And here's the honest breakdown. Well spent, high human need value, SNAP, food programs, Social Security, Medicaid, veterans care, education funding, infrastructure, mixed value, healthcare spending overall, defense spending, tax expenditures, low value. What's my final answer? For meeting human needs, SNAP and similar programs are well spent, they're highly efficient, and they're extremely small in the context of the $6 trillion federal budget. So, what's the real question here? I think the real question here is, instead of supplying these SNAP benefits in a way where they cost as much as they do, $216 per person per month. So that would mean that we're saying on a per dollar amount, it takes about $50 a week to feed a single person. Now, if anyone listening to this grew up as poor as I did, $50 a week is actually quite a bit of money, especially if you're buying things in bulk. And a baby, for example, doesn't eat $50 a week, right? You can spend probably about 20 to $30 roughly in formula per week for a baby, roughly. And that depends on whether or not the baby is overtly fussy, gassy, things of that nature. That kind of messes with, their overall consumption. But in general, these numbers are inflated. And why is that? Well, the reason they're inflated is because of the fact that once you start working in everything else, how much it costs to oversee the program, administer it, how much it costs to transport goods and services and things of everything else, everything just starts adding costs. Weight adds to the shipping cost. The shipping cost adds to the storage costs, which adds to, you know, all these other things, right? We pump out all this money to take care of SNAP and programs that are similar to it. But what are we actually accomplishing? Are we actually getting into the nitty gritty of what it means to be a society and what it means to be human, and are we really putting the money effectively in a direction that's going to provide us with the most bang for our buck? Are we demonizing people? Are we vilifying people? You know, like that's a question I have. So with all of the ways we administer these benefits, are we setting people up to be demonized for taking a government handout? Are we? Is there a way to do it? And what does chat say? Chat says yes. The way that the U.S. administers benefit absolutely contributes to people being demonized for needing help. It's not accidental. It's structural, cultural, and political. And it's got evidence to back all this up. U.S. benefits are designed to be means tested, not universal. That means that you've got to apply, you got to document your income, you got to prove your hardship, you have to submit 2 reviews and meet strict thresholds. It creates an us versus them dynamic. You have the taxpayers, they're the givers. And then you have the receivers, they're the benefit users, but they're also the taxpayers. They're also working poor. Now, universal programs like Social Security, public schools, fire departments, they don't create this divide, but means tested programs do. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Andrew, I'm not going to just let anyone come in and eat. I'm not going to just give away money for nothing. And I need you to hear yourself when you say that. Surveillance, bureaucracy, and verification create stigma. To receive SNAP, housing vouchers, Medicaid, TANF, people have to document their expenses, submit bank statements, have periodic recertification. They've got to meet requirements. They have to undergo audits. They have to risk losing benefits if they make too much. They have to report changes constantly. This administrative burden sends a message. You must prove you deserve help. Must prove that you deserve. Deserve being the key word. Is there a reason that we developed societies? Is one of those reasons in developing societies to provide basic needs? Is this a basic need that we can provide without shaming people and making them feel less than? And if the idea is that we want there to be a strong middle class, then can we finally just be honest about an upper class and a lower class? And then let's just give the lower class the small amount of dignity that we can. And let's just be honest about their situation. You're going to work and you're going to do all of the crap jobs that we don't want to do. We is the middle and upper class. And as a thank you for doing the job with the small amount of wages that I'm going to give you, I'm going to make sure that you don't have to worry about your basic needs. And I can do this in a way that doesn't affect my bottom line because of the fact that we've built this thing that we call society. And everyone's, well, not me, obviously, not the big companies and corporations, but everyone else will pay their quote unquote fair share of taxes. And we'll use that money to make sure that you don't starve to death. But it also guarantees that, we don't have to pay you any more money as well. Can we just live the truth instead of blanketing over the lie, where we kind of try to pretend that the working poor don't exist? Benefits are intentionally made visible. Snap uses EBT cards that look different. They're solid white if you've never seen one. It's pretty obvious when someone's using a Snap card. Housing vouchers require landlord participation. Medicaid is handled differently than private insurance. Free school lunch can single out kids unless schools do universal meals. So visibility equals stigma. Universal programs avoid this entirely. U.S. political culture moralizes poverty. Unlike European or East Asian countries that view poverty primarily as a social failure, which it should be, especially in the richest country in the world. But, that's a conversation for another day. The U.S. historically frames poverty as a personal failing. You didn't work hard enough. I mean, look around. This is America, the land of opportunity. If you had just worked harder, you wouldn't be in the situation that you're in. You didn't save properly. The problem is with you in this united country of states, united under the flag, the stars and the stripes, united together, side by side on the flag, in this place where we're all united. It's your fault. People just need to work harder. People should just work harder. Government dependency is bad. I agree that it's bad. Dependency, I agree. Absolutely. 100%. Handouts encourage laziness. You know what really encourages laziness? Depression and hopelessness. And what could possibly trigger those things faster than not being able to get a job? That's another video we'll definitely do. Man, we could provide jobs for people. I'll get into that. Another video, another video. Let's stay on topic. These narratives ignore wage stagnation, cost of living, medical bankruptcy, childcare costs, systemic inequality. We'll talk about that another time too. Disability, trauma, chronic illness, single parents working 2 to 3 jobs. They produce shame in people who need help. Politicians deliberately weaponize welfare stigma, stir up the base, us versus them. Means tested programs are intentionally underfunded. People on benefits often internalize shame. Why does the US do it this way? Well, there's 2 reasons, and this is what chat's telling us. Number one, they want to keep the benefits politically palatable. Many lawmakers support safety nets only if the eligibility is strict, oversight is heavy, benefits are limited, and the poor are seen as truly deserving. And number two, to discourage use. If the programs are hard to access, fewer people apply, costs stay low, stigma reduces demand. It is, frankly, a form of a control. Social control. Would universal programs eliminate demonization? Yes, almost entirely. Examples, you've got public schools, fire and police services, Social Security, Medicare for seniors. These are all programs that we find ways to fund and we find ways to pay for. We could do the same thing for just feeding people, but we don't. But we could. And everyone that's listening to this, you might think, well, how would we pay for that? Well, we would pay for it the same way that we pay for any of those other programs that we just listed. And everyone would have an EBT card. And if you need the benefits and the services because you get fired, well, everyone knows when you're working because the company is filing benefits for you, the taxes that come out of your check. So they would know when you're not working. And if you're not working, then your card is active. Go to the store, get some food, find another job, find some purpose in life. Do what you need to do. We could do all of that. But the way US benefits are designed right now, it absolutely contributes to people being demonized for needing basic support. It's a choice that's built into the system. So what can we do? And that's one of the great things about having ChatGPT. This is where the fun part of this all begins. This is like where it really starts. Can we solve this problem? Can we solve this problem? Maybe we can. So let's look at this, right. Top of the list, public schools. How do we fund public schools? How is it that we can make public schools exist and be free for everyone in the US? How can we do that? And chat's going to tell us we fund public schools for everyone in the US because the entire system was deliberately designed to be universal, publicly funded, and viewed as a public good rather than a private benefit. Local taxes, mostly property taxes, 45% of the funding. State government funding, 47% of the funding. And then federal funding, there's another 8% that kind of makes up the total thing, right? So you got local, you got state, you've got federal. These are the percentages, okay? And it pays for buildings, teachers, transportation, supplies, administration, school meals, special education, extracurriculars, and the list goes on, okay? Is there a way to apply this same funding model to feeding everyone in America using the same EBT system we have, and everyone just has a EBT card that will turn on when they lose their job and deactivate when they start working again, right? Everyone has a card. We all have the system. Can we use a model that is similar to how we fund schools and public education and apply that model to EBT? Same infrastructure, right? So the short answer here, look, chat's thinking about it and it's theorizing. Okay, you could build something like that using the same EBT infrastructure and a more universal funding model. But the exact version you described, card only when you're unemployed, would still leave a lot of hungry people out and recreate some of the same problems. So like it's analyzing what I was doing, it's finding some flaws. Let me walk through in plain terms, and then we'll sketch a version that actually matches what you're aiming for. Okay, so mechanically, could we use EBT for anyone, for everyone, right? Yeah, the system already exists and at massive scale. Tens of millions of people, they use EBT each month via SNAP, retailers, back-end payment networks, state agencies, all that infrastructure is already there. So from a pure logistics and tech standpoint, it's absolutely possible to give everyone an EBT style account and program it to turn on or off based on certain conditions, employment, income, etc. The heavy lift isn't the card, It's the rules behind when and how it turns on. So that's the heavy lift, okay? So the model that you're suggesting in Spirit, all right, so we'll make food a guaranteed right. It's a basic need, right? But only when you need it. So we'll use the existing EBT rails and it'll turn on when you lose your job and it'll turn off when you're back at work. That's kind of a hybrid between universal infrastructure, everyone has a card, and conditional benefit. It's only active when you're below some work slash income threshold. It's universal access with conditional activation. And that makes sense to me. That makes sense to a lot of people. Now, that's already better than what we have now in some ways, right? Because no one has to figure out how to sign up from scratch. Okay? Look at that. He's even getting a little loose with the language. Okay? No one has to figure out how to sign up from scratch. Stigma goes down because everyone has the same card. You got it when you turned 18. All right, maybe when you turn 21. I don't know. We'll figure out the right age, right? But the point is, there you go. Crisis, layoffs, recessions, pandemics. Remember that? It's easier to respond to. We flip a switch, boom, you've got the credit. Get the things that you need. But there are two big problems, and that's fine. What's the first problem? Okay, a lot of hungry people have jobs. Right now, a huge chunk of people that receive SNAP, they're already working. They're just underpaid, part time, gig based, or they're supporting families, large families like me, on low wages. So a strict card only turns on when employee system would be amiss. Okay, so people working 15 to 25 hours a week when they want full time work, they would miss out. People with unstable gig work, they would miss out. People working full time, low wages in high cost cities, they would miss out. People who just had a medical bill, a car breakdown, or a rent spike, they would miss out. Many single parents trying to juggle childcare and work or multiple jobs, they would miss out. So those folks aren't unemployed, they're just broke. They just don't have the money to survive beyond just paying their bills and just trying to live. So if activation is only based on has a job, doesn't have a job, you'd be helping some genuinely struggling people, but you would still exclude a ton of others who can't reliably afford food. So this puts you back in the means test tight rules world where we're trying to get away from that, okay? Here's the second problem. Employment is a blunt instrument. To drive this system, you would need to have some data feed like the IRS income reports, which lag by a year, payroll systems, they only catch traditional employees, state unemployment insurance systems only for people who bother filing the claims for unemployment. Like myself, I don't file for unemployment. And the reason I don't do that is because my boys are special needs and they get Social Security. If I file for unemployment, it messes up their Social Security benefits and we need those social security benefits to take care of the boys. So I can't even file for unemployment when I'm unemployed. Otherwise, I mess up everything. And we did it one time years and years ago, and it messed up their benefits for, I don't even know. It was such a long time. It was like 6 months, 7 months. They went without medical. They went without a lot of things. So I just don't do it anymore. You know, if I'm out of work, I'm a beggar. I am a mooch to the system and the society until I find another job because there's really nothing else that I can do because the system is designed in such a way to punish me if I try to get an official handout, if that makes sense. So I don't. And what about under the table work, gig work on multiple platforms, self-employed people, up and down income? You'd either constantly turn people's benefits on and off chaotically, or you would need some type of bureaucracy to verify, appeal, track special situations. It's exactly what we already have, but it's just in a different wrapper, right? So those are two big problems, okay? So Chat GPT, and this is what's great about having these conversations, right? This is my very intelligent friend who doesn't really have a bias, just has facts. It's going to bring up, and again, all this information that it's displaying and it's laying out, it's pulling from our collective knowledge as a human species. And it's so great and it's so refreshing to me at least. And to be able to sit with someone and not have them roll their eyes at you or to give you the deep sigh, but to really just kind of go down that conversation with you and really just kind of lay things out for you in a way that you can understand. So a cleaner version, universal baseline, income based boost. All right. If the real goal is no one in America should go hungry, and I think that's the real goal, right? That's the goal of society, to meet those basic needs. And we're talking about one, just food right now. We shouldn't demonize people for needing help. A better design looks like this. And so ChatGPT is already coming up with a better design. Okay? How many times have you talked to somebody and they said, "Oh, there's no easy answer." They're smart enough to come up with a way to do it, but maybe in the back of their mind, they don't want to put something out that someone could go and pick apart and means test and be like, you know what, this isn't good based on X, Y, and Z. Or they just don't want to be open up to criticism. They don't want to open themselves up to criticism. Chat doesn't care about that. Chat's like, hey, here's a solution. All right, let's see what it says. Everyone gets an EBT account by default. It's created automatically at birth when you get a social security number. Look, remember earlier I was like, I don't know what age, right? Boom, chat's like, hey, look, you get an account. Everyone gets an account. Okay, when you're born, you get a social security number and you get your EBT account. It's just part of being a United States citizen, like a social security number or a public school assignment. Okay, step two, universal basic food credit. Okay, small, but for everyone. So here's a structure conceptually. It's not exact numbers, okay? Every adult, you get a small monthly food credit, let's say $50, okay? Every child, same or slightly more. And it's automatically loaded onto this card. So this normalizes the system. Everyone's on it. There is no stigma. It uses public school logic. Every kid gets school. Every person gets some baseline food support, okay? So this is the kind of the thought process of we make it universal, we make it flow consistently, and then we go from there. Now, income-based multipliers, all right? So instead of this on when you're unemployed, off when you're employed, your lower income will multiply your food credit and make it bigger. When you're higher income, you just get a universal baseline. Now, here's another thing too. And I don't know if chat's going to say this, but I just want to say it right now, right? To those individuals who are like, yeah, but we can't just give money out to everybody. Okay, but what we could do is make it use or lose. So your $50 is not $50 that consistently stacks up and stacks up. So by the end of the year, you have $600. You can go blow it on some big meal. Your $50 can just be a monthly credit, meaning that the amount of money never changes. The multipliers can change to make sure that throughout the month that you're eating, but none of the money actually rolls over. So instead of it being something of a deposit-based structure, it becomes more of a credit line, and a credit line that needs to be balanced at the end of the year. You know, just the way any other credit card company would balance all the credit that they push out. But anyways, let's see what chat says. Let's see what chat says. That's just me thinking off the cuff, right? So think of it like this. If you're under 20,000 a year, you get your full benefit. It's similar to Robust Snap, what we have currently in place. If you're 20 to 50, you get your partial top up. If you're above 50, you just get the universal baseline, nothing at all, depending upon how we actually structure the final product, right? You could say, well, if you're above this, then you just have $0 credit on there. Now, you can automate most of it from tax returns and real-time payroll data. That's something that we can do. I know for a fact that um, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security income because of my boys, and then of course SNAP. They know when I'm working and they know when I'm not working. I get letters from them, and it literally says, "Hey, we notice an increase in how much money that you're making." So they know. So they have access to this data. So we know that this can do it. Now, give people a way to manually report sudden changes, i.e. job losses, medical issues, unexpected bills, things of that nature, and then they can just provide a show. They can show you, hey, this is the company that towed my car. This is how much they charged me. This is my current bank account. I have $5 in there. I need to eat. Can you multiply me? Can you bump me? You know, and it's the same thing as what they do now. You know, you go in for a thing, a little interview, whatever, and that's what you do. And people could still do that. We could still have that in place, but we can make it more universal. Now you've got universal access, you've got targeted support, and you've got less bureaucracy. Fewer separate programs, one unified rail. Okay? Now, we have hundreds of lawmakers who spent the last 5 months doing nothing to make the government better, to make the United States better. They passed one big bill in July, and since then they've done jack nothing. And here we are with chat. We've been doing this probably for 20, 30 minutes. I don't know how long we've been doing it. And we're already solving something. Now, this is the type of thing that could be on the floor, being debated, bipartisan for sure. Everyone wants people to eat. You go to rural Appalachia, they're red, they're voting for Trump, but they're hungry and they need food just like everybody else does, even in those blue states. Now, funding it. Let's use the public school logic, okay? Public school taxes exist because we decided as a country that everyone benefits if every child is educated. You can make the same argument for food. We want every child to be able to eat, regardless of the sins of their parents, the failings of their caregivers, their providers. They should not be punished because mom and dad are stupid or bad with their money. Everyone benefits if no one is hungry. When you're desperate to eat, you're more likely to commit crime. I've spent the vast majority of my life poor, and I've seen the desperation in the mirror when it's myself, and in the actions of my cousins and other family members and friends and their mugshots. Trust me, everyone benefits when no one is hungry. Everyone. You fund it with the same kinds of tools, federal income taxes. There's some share of state funds, just like schools, possibly a dedicated national food security fund, like some states do with lotteries for education. If SNAP is $100 billion per year today, a universal boost version might be more, but not insane relative to the $6 trillion federal budget we're talking about now. It could cost 150 to 250 billion, depending upon how generous you make it. And obviously, again, remember, if you turn it into some kind of revolving credit system, then it's not actual um, over end cost, especially when it comes to individuals who are making more than enough money that they don't need a $50 per month baseline. And of course, the number, it shifts, you know. The percentage of working poor in the country is going to determine the ultimate dollar amount, but that's still less than many other line items and likely cheaper than the downstream costs of hunger, sickness, instability, crime. Now, would this still demonize people? Much less, much less. Everyone has the same kind of card. We all have it. Everyone's got one. Kids using it look no different from kids whose parents are in six figures. It's not welfare. It's like public school or fire, police protection. It's a standard part of social infrastructure because what is the point of all of this if not to accomplish those ultimate goals? We talk about the greatness that is America and what it is that we stand for as a country with freedom and dignity and the pursuit of happiness and everything else. Can you really pursue those things when you don't know what you're eating for dinner? It's a little harder when you're stressed. So my exact idea, adjusted so it really works. Core instincts are solid. Thank you, Chad. I appreciate that. Use the EBT system we already have. Normalize having a car. Automate the help when people hit hard times. If we're turning the idea into policy, Chat says, give everyone an EBT account by default. Provide a small universal food credit line. Automatically increase the credit based on current income. Those are the multipliers I mentioned earlier. Treat it politically and culturally like public education. It's a public good. It's not a poor people program. I mean, Chat's trying to be very political here. Look, we all know that it is a poor people program. It's a program because we understand the necessity for the serfdom, right? Look, I'm not trying to be, what's the word I'm looking at? Contentious, I guess. I'm not trying to fight anybody on it. Look, I understand. I understand because I consider myself to be an intelligent person. And being the hallmark of any intelligent person is that they can have two ideas in their head that that naturally conflict with one another and hold those two ideas in their head without going crazy. Look, capitalism is good compared to other experiments that have been run across the world. Socialism on its own, unchecked, is bad. So hybridizing or mixing elements from both of these things is possible. It doesn't take away from Walmart. It doesn't take away from Whole Foods. It doesn't take away from Amazon. It doesn't take away from any of these companies or restaurants or anywhere else if part of how we do things is just make sure people don't go hungry. It doesn't take away from any of those things. And people can still have all of their capitalist agendas and become trillionaire dragons hoarding over their wealth. They can do all of those things. And we can still just make sure, like we make everyone go to public school, we also have everyone eating and staying alive and not going hungry and not worrying about where their food's going to come from and not stigmatizing them if they need that assistance. Okay? Automatically increase the credit based on current income. Treat it politically and culturally like public education. It's a public good. That structure actually does what you're reaching for. Okay? It feeds people, it reduces stigma, it uses existing infrastructure, aligns with the idea that the point of society is to meet basic human needs so people can live and flourish. If you want to push this further, we can do all these other things, but really we're just going to bring the video to a close because, again, like I said, this is what the channel is all about, having these chats and kind of exploring these topics in a way that maybe you can't explore them all the time. And so, have chats of your own, like I said, explore these ideas. There's so many constructs in our head, and uh, there's so many ways that we can solve these problems, and we can solve them. Normal people can solve these problems, and chat is there. Chat GPT is there to help assist you in solving these problems, to take the ideas that we have and to make them better. I would encourage each and every one of you to share this video with a congressman or a senator and say, look, this is what AI can do for you. And can we actually solve some real problems? Can we actually push through some actual legislation where we just solve the basic needs and as a group, as a collective, maybe actually push for the end game, right? I know my gamers out there are listening to this. Hopefully, they're listening to this. All these people that are like, "Hey, if this is a game, what's the ultimate goal? How do we win? How do we win government? How do we win society? You know, is it utopia? Is it the individualism? Is it the unchecked capitalism? What is it, man? And right now, based on what this conversation, it's just meeting the basic human needs so people can live and flourish, man. So look, whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat, whether you want to spend money on illegal immigrants or you don't, or whatever the case may be, I think we can all agree U.S. citizens should should eat. And we can do that. And we can do it without making anyone feel bad or whatever the case may be. We can do it all because we are the greatest country on the planet. We are. I think that. I think it. There's an American exceptionalism that just can't be matched from any other country. And if it could be, then there would be vast examples that would exist that would be tied to other countries and their achievements globally. And there just isn't. Okay. No offense to China, no offense to Russia, no offense to Africa or Europe or Australia or anybody else. No offense. I'm just saying Americans can do great things. And there you go. I'm gonna wrap everything up. I hope you guys enjoyed the chat. Like I said, like, subscribe, do all the things, and get out there and get some chats going. All right, take care. Bye.